Chef Gerwich here for Modern Tactical Shooting. Now this video is all about tactical watches, my picks, and what I've used over the years during my 19 years in Special Forces. But before I go over my picks for tactical watches, let me cover a little bit about the history of watches in Special Forces. Now, since the creation of Special Forces going back to the 60s and into the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the brand that was most, I would say, favored by Special Forces was Rolex. And the reason for this, aside from the prestige of wearing a Rolex on your wrist, the reason why Rolexes were specifically worn by a lot of Green Berets is it was used or seen as a bargaining or barter tool if you got in a rough situation. With Green Berets being stationed all around the world, by wearing a Rolex, if you had nothing on you and say you got hemmed up somewhere and you needed to bribe your way out of, say, a bad situation, well, you had that Rolex. So it was actually seen as a survival tool, an asset in case, again, you needed to, say, bribe or barter your way out of a situation, something was going wrong. Now, I joined Special Forces in 1998, and that was the waning years of Rolex. Yes, there were some guys in SF that wore Rolex, and it was part of the mystique of being a Green Beret. You go out, you get a Rolex, you get a Randall knife, but that was really the earlier eras. When I joined Special Forces in 1998, that's the time where Casio G-Shock really was coming into play with a lot of SF guys. It was functionality of the watch over the prestige of Rolex and that being able to barter it as a tool. We wanted watches that just had some decent functions and were basically indestructible. And I'll tell you right now, I'm a giant Casio G-Shock fanboy. I've been wearing Casio G-Shocks throughout my career, many different models, and I'm gonna get into those right now. All right, so kicking it off with Casio G-Shock. This is a GW6900. I actually had this watch since 2006, and this watch has basically all the common features you're gonna find on most G-Shocks. 200-meter water resistance, has a stopwatch, has an alarm, has world time, has a light, of course, so you can see. So it has all the basic or common functions you're gonna find on most G-Shocks. Now, I've had this since 2006, and this is my PT watch, meaning I would wear this every morning for physical training or any arduous type training. We're doing rucksack marching, things such as that. I believe I paid $60 for this watch back in 2006. It's solar powered. This is my beater watch. So again, if I was doing any hardcore physical training, this would be the watch I wear in case I broke it or lost it. It was only 50, 60 bucks at the time, so my beater watch. Now this watch is from 2006, it's solar powered. Your average solar battery, they do wear out over time. You're gonna get at least 5 years out of a modern solar battery. This is a 17-year-old watch and the solar battery in it is still good. I don't wear this watch that much anymore since I retired, but just to test out the solar battery, this sits up on my wash boxes on a windowsill, so it gets charged every day by sunlight. But just to see how strong the solar battery is still, I put it in my camera bag for 8 days, no sunlight. It will go into like a sleep mode. We won't see the screen to save power. I stuck it in my camera bag for 8 days, took it out, and once I started moving the watch around, it came back to life. The battery is still stout. So a 17-year-old solar watch battery and this 6900 is still going strong. One reason why this is a very popular model, it's probably, you can consider it a baseline G-Shock, but again, this was my go-to physical training watch, arduous training watch, the GW6900. It's still being sold to this day. It sells for around $89 on Amazon. So this is a great, I'd say if you want a basic watch where you can just throw it on and not have a care in the world, then it's this watch right here, the GW6900. Now, next up, of course, is another G-Shock watch. Now, this is their GA100-1A1. It has the same exact functions as the 6900, except this has analog style hands. So it just looks a little bit more, I would say, fancy or classy to me. Now, this was my daily wearer for the longest time. I've had this watch, I believe, over 10 years now. If you read any of my older SWAT magazine articles, I wrote for SWAT magazine from 2012 up until the very last issue. I believe it was 2019. Chances are, if there were any photos of me at the range in any of those articles, I was wearing this watch right here. It was my daily wearer. I'd wear that 6900 for PT, but this is the one because I like analog, I like hands. I just think the classic look on a watch is great. All the same features and durability of a G-Shock, but just a little bit different look. This was the watch I wore, my daily wearer. This watch is still for sale. I believe at the time I paid $90 for it, but I found it on Amazon currently for just over $70, so that's not a bad deal. So, pretty cool watch. Okay, the next watch I'm going to talk about, I actually don't have any more. It died on me back in 2017 when I was on a European trip. But this watch I wore during all 3 of my tours in Afghanistan, and that is a Casio Pathfinder. You can see it on my wrist right here, one of my favorite photos. This is from my 3rd tour in Afghanistan. I absolutely love the Casio Pathfinder. Now, they don't make it anymore, but they do offer the Casio Pro Trek. It's the modern version of the Pathfinder. But with the Pathfinder, why I loved it, one, it was solar. So long as it got some sunlight once in a while, the watch would last forever. But it had a barometer, altimeter, and a compass built into the watch. And if you calibrated it, it was pretty damn accurate. And with that compass and altimeter, you can dead reckon land nav. During my deployments, I didn't carry a lensatic compass on me. That's good for when you're doing land nav training. Nobody carries those in combat and land navs off of a lensatic compass. We used Garmin E-Trexes at the time, but that watch was a great backup. I could just wear it on my wrist, and as I was land navving around or basically patrolling on missions, you use dead reckoning, and I can get a quick azimuth with that watch and check the elevation, and you can pretty much tell where you are at. So I absolutely loved that watch. That was my deployment watch. Again, I wore it on 3 combat deployments. Super great watch. I can't talk too much about how much I loved the Casio Pathfinder line. It's no more. It's now the Pro Trek line, but a Casio Pro Trek has all the same features as that Pathfinder. Again, super useful watch, solar powered, and you can still find that watch on Amazon. Let me check the price. It is so $216 on Amazon. If you're looking for a simple, super rugged and reliable watch with a lot of features, that compass, barometer, and elevation. I actually wore that watch skiing. Anytime I went skiing, I'm an old school skier, I wore my Pathfinder just because it's good to know what elevation you're at. And with that barometer, you know when a weather front is coming in, and I found that super useful when you're out skiing or camping. So very practical watch. Again, they don't make the Pathfinder line anymore. They sell used Pathfinders on eBay, but they're pretty beat up. But I would highly recommend, if you're looking for a watch with some multiple functions, then the Casio Pro Trek line. Now, when my Casio Pathfinder finally bit the dust back in 2017, my wife got me as a replacement a Casio G-Shock Mudmaster. Now, this is probably one of their toughest watches out of the G-Shock line. Has all the same features of all the normal G-Shocks that are there. So your world time, stopwatch, alarm, such as that. But the Mudmaster also has a compass, which I find super useful and necessary. Now, it doesn't have barometer, altimeter, but it does give the temperature. So it has 2 extra functions over your normal G-Shock. A super rugged looking watch. Now, I got into watches about 3 years ago. When I say got into watches, I got into your old school mechanical style watches. I'm wearing a Seiko Monster right now. This is a mechanical watch. It's powered by wrist movement, or you're gonna wind it. And I have, I would say, some pretty nice mechanical watches now. I've got a Tudor, but the only watch I really get compliments on when I'm out and about is this G-Shock Mudmaster. I get a lot of compliments when I wear this watch. So it's probably one of the best looking G-Shocks out there. Now, the 2 things I don't like about this watch, one, I do miss that barometer and altimeter function, but this is not a solar watch. This is battery powered, has 3 years of battery life. And when I say 3 years of battery life, it's 3 years to the day. This thing is going to die exactly 3 years from when the battery is installed. And to get it replaced properly, you really need to send it into an authorized dealer. They'll change the battery out, check the seals, and pressure test the watch. You just don't want to get your battery for a G-Shock changed out at one of those kiosks in the mall because it's not going to be sealed up correctly. So That's kind of a pain in the butt. Again, it's 3 years, but if I was back in the Army doing deployments every other year, I'd hate for my battery to crap out halfway through a deployment because I forgot, oh, coming up on 3 years. So I kind of missed the solar function and the extra functions of the Pathfinder line, or the ProTrek line as it's known now. But this was my replacement for that. My wife got it for me. If I had to choose getting a Mudmaster or a ProTrek, I would probably go for the ProTrek. Now, I believe my wife paid around $350 for this Mudmaster, and it's a pretty stout watch. You can really beat this thing to death. So if you're looking for a super rugged, stylish G-Shock, then look for the Mudmaster. Now, my era, I retired in 2017. I was the G-Shock era. Towards, I would say, 2015-ish, Sun 2 watches started to come into play, but really the watch that has taken over special operations and really is very popular with all the military services. I see a lot of the current soldiers wearing this brand of watch, and that is by Garmin. Their Instinct line. This is a Phoenix watch. I borrowed it from a buddy, but all these watches have a ton of great features. And let's face it, I'm from a waning era, the end of the analog era. G-Shock was the fanciest watch. But now with smart watches, of course, younger soldiers demand a lot more out of their watches besides time, date, and elevation and a compass. Garmin lines, of course, they all have built-in GPSs, but a lot of these watches have a ton of other handy features. Some of them are, of course, heart rate monitors. On the Instinct tactical watch, they even have a upgrade. You can get a ballistic app in there. There's Halo Jumpmaster features for these watches. Just a ton of features built into these watches. Of course, compass, you can get your altitude. Tons of features. Now, again, this is their Phoenix watch. I borrowed it from a buddy of mine. But if I were going to choose a Garmin watch, I would probably look at their Instinct line, and they do have a tactical watch. Here's a photo of it right here. And it goes for just over $500. Yeah, you're getting into a little bit more pricier. Your average G-Shock, high-end G-Shocks around $350. Your lower-end ones, like that 6900, you can find for $50 to $80, and you can beat it to death. But again, your modern soldiers are demanding more from their watches. It's the smartwatch generation, and the Garmin fits the bill. During my time in Special Forces, the Garmin E-Trex was the go-to land nav device. Of course, Garmin's moved on. They have other military models. And if you've ever wondered what that box is on the front of Special Operations soldiers' chests that looks like a smartphone, that's called an ATAC system. That basically does all your land nav. It does a ton of stuff. You don't need to carry paper maps anymore. What aircraft sees, you can see at the same time. That started to come into play as I was retiring, and now all Special Forces guys have that ATAC system. So you don't really need a separate GPS anymore because you have that. But a Garmin watch would be a great backup because finally, over the last, I would say 10 years, they've got a GPS into watch size in a practical size. So this has a ton of great features. Now, the only downside to Garmin watches, these are solar battery powered, meaning as they get solar light, it will keep the watch alive, but you have to plug in and charge this watch every once in a while to get it up to full strength. You've actually got to plug it in. So for me, if I was going on deployments, I would view that as kind of a pain to have to every 30, 40 days maybe plug this watch in to get it back up to a full charge. The solar power just keeps it going in between full charges. That's the only downside I see of Garmin watches. But again, the features on this Garmin outdo any G-Shock or ProTrek watch out there. So, and that GPS, and again, tons of great features in these watches. So again, if you want a do-it-all tactical watch, and again, these have a ton of functions, I would look at the Garmin Instinct, their tactical watch, or look at the Phoenix line. These watches start around $500. The Instinct Tactical Edition is $449, and again, you can get some upgrades, ballistic apps, which would be super handy. So a great watch. If it came down to it, if say I had to rejoin the Army and redeploy, what would be the watch I'd go with? I would probably go with a Casio Pro Trek. Again, I'm a Casio fanboy, and the only thing keeping me from going with the Garmin is that need to plug it in and charge it once in a while. That's the only thing holding me back. Super great function in this watch. So I'd probably still go with that Casio Pro Trek. I think it's a super handy watch. Now, one honorable mention I do want to talk about, and that is this Seiko automatic dive watch. Now, this is a Seiko Monster. It's totally old school, but let me talk about why. Actually, this is my preferred range watch. If you've been watching any of my videos over the last 2 years where I've had my channel, chances are this Seiko Monster has been on my wrist for the range footage. It's really replaced all my G-Shocks just because I've started to get into watch collecting and I made the transition from quartz G-Shocks to your classic mechanical watches. But I'll talk about why I think this gets an honorable mention for a tactical watch right now. So your original tactical watch is a dive watch, a mechanical dive watch. James Bond, he wore a Rolex dive watch for a reason. It can handle abuse. And that's one more reason why Green Berets were big on Rolexes back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, is a dive watch because it's built to withstand going 100, 200 meters underwater, made out of steel. It's got to have tight seals. These can handle a lot of abuse. Now, they're not specifically shock rated like a G-Shock, but again, in the 60s, the first quartz or battery powered watch didn't come out till 1969. It was probably fragile for the time. G-Shocks didn't come out till 1983. So if you're looking for a watch that could handle the rigors of combat or just being beat up, then you probably went for a mechanical dive watch. Now, this Seiko Monster right here, this is an automatic watch, meaning it's powered by the movement of your wrist. There's a flywheel in here, and as long as you move it once in a while, it will stay working, and it still does have a manual wind. Now, in the movie Apocalypse Now, which came out in 1979, Captain Willard, played by Martin Sheen, he was wearing a Seiko dive watch in it, and it's period correct for the movie. And that is a model 6105. It's called a cushion case. It's a Seiko diver. That watch nowadays commands huge prices on the used market, those original 6105s. In fact, that model is nicknamed the Willard. They offer, I think, a modern version of it still at Seiko, but it's correct for that time. A lot of special operations, a lot of soldiers wore dive watches in Vietnam. Just because, again, those were the stoutest options if you wanted a wristwatch that could survive combat. Now, after I retired, I started getting into mechanical watches. I wish I had discovered it years before, but one good way to stay broke is to get into watch collecting, and I've started it the last 3 years. I like cameras, I like guns, and I like watches, so I'm permanently broke. And now this Seiko Monster runs about $500. It's a more modern looking watch. You can get a Seiko Willard looking watch without buying a Willard. Those watches start at over $1,000, but they have the King Seiko line, which is around $500. And again, what you're getting with a mechanical watch is you're getting a time and a date. So compared to a modern G-Shock or even that Garmin watch, these watches, practicality wise, they don't have a lot of features, but if you just want that cool classic look, this is my go-to range watch now. Again, you've probably seen it in a lot of my videos, and if you've had an eagle eye, you may have noticed I'm wearing a vintage Seiko on my wrist in a lot of my videos. I have a few vintage Seikos, so again, I'm a Seikoholic. But there it is, my picks for tactical watches. You can't go wrong with G-Shock, and really, the modern soldier, there's a good chance, I would say, just from what I've seen, I live around the Bragg area, and I see a lot of Garmin watches on the wrists of a lot of soldiers. So if you're looking for probably the current go-to tactical watch, again, you probably got to go with Garmin. Me personally, if I had to go back into combat and I could only take one watch with me, just because of the features, I would go with the Pro Trek. And again, that solar battery lasts forever. I like having an altimeter, a barometer, and a compass. You can dead reckon land nav all the way with that watch. So again, those are my picks and the history of the watches that I wore during my time in special operations. Again, hopefully you found this video entertaining, a little informative. I might do a video on my, I would say, classic mechanical automatic watches if there's any interest. I own one Tudor. I don't have a super high-end collection of watches, but I'm just trying to build a collection. If there's interest in that, put it down below in the comments. If not, my next videos, of course, will all be shooting related or tactical related. I always have plenty of content on the way. But again, I'm Jeff Gerwich. Thanks for watching.